Hello, dear students. So let's begin with Macbeth Act 2, Scene 2. So this is popularly known as the murder scene. Okay, that is, in this scene, Macbeth will murder Duncan. However, if we focus on Macbeth, we see that Shakespeare's treatment of murder is twofold. That is, in some cases, Shakespeare shows the murder on stage, as is the case of Banquo, as is the case of Macduff's wife and child. And in some cases, Shakespeare reports the murder, that is, the murder happens off screen or off stage. Now, why does this happen? That is, if a murder happens off stage and not on stage in front of the audience's eyes, then first of all, that murder remains suggestive, and you have to imagine how the murder was committed. But apart from that, you see, Duncan's murder is such a pivotal scene in the entire scope of Macbeth that Shakespeare wants to keep it suggestive so that we imagine the gruesomeness, the horrificness of the murder itself rather than seeing it for itself. Because once you see something, that sticks in your mind. But once you have to imagine something, you ponder about it, you think about it, you keep on thinking about it, and the murder resonates, the murder continues, the murder echoes throughout the rest of the play, and you will find multiple occasions in which you are reminded of this murder because it was not shown on stage. So we begin Act 2, Scene 2. So the location is the same, that is the castle of Inverness. Enter Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth says, "That which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What hath quenched them hath given me fire." So Lady Macbeth is drunk because she is faltering with her fowl, and hence she needs to be fortified with alcohol to restore her fugitive valor. Otherwise, she would not be able to conduct the duties of the night. And so she has made the chamberlains of Duncan drunk. And she says that the very alcohol which has made them drunk has given my sole purpose its uh, power. And then she says, look, there's a dash. So now she's doing something. Over here, she's listening to a sound that is happening in the backstage. And she says, hark, peace. So calm down, shush, and listen. It was the owl that shrieked the fatal bellman, which gives the sternest good night. Back in those days, what happened was that there was a bellman. Say, if there was a convict who was about to be hanged, so the bellman would ring the bell in each hour and would let the convict know that how many hours the convict has left. A similar discourse was found in Macbeth earlier, and she says that the owl's screech sounds like the bellman who makes the convict aware of how many hours he has left. So, look, in a way, she has convicted herself of the conviction that she is committing a crime. He is about it. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. I have drugged their possets, that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. So basically, she suggests that I have made their gruel so very thick and rich with alcohol that now even nature and death are fighting that whether they shall live or they will die because of the alcohol content of their posset. Posset is basically a kind of a gruel. Okay, but look, there is something very interesting. She says he is about it, and look, she cannot still refer to the murder as the murder. She is referring to it as it. And in Act 1, Scene 7, line 70, she said, "You and I will do it together." But now she is saying that he is at it. So she has already distanced herself from the murder because she knows that she cannot carry it through. And now Macbeth says from within, "Who's there? What? Oh." So, on the one hand, her harking exposes her nervousness and her weakness in the process. But that Macbeth is also hearing sounds is a marker that they are together in their lack of integrity towards the murder. Lady Macbeth says, "Alack, I am afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us." So look, Lady Macbeth now says alack means alas. So she's afraid that everybody has woken up and Macbeth has failed to murder Duncan. Now their plan is exposed and now they're confounded together. So when the danger is assessed by her, she believes in suffering together. And here we find a marked change from Macbeth, who, when danger comes, trusts the onus of the danger on somebody else. But look at Lady Macbeth. In danger, she clings on to Macbeth as together, as an unit. And again she says, "Ha, I laid their daggers ready, they could not miss him. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. My husband." So this time she is hearing the chirping of a cricket. And then she says that I had laid the daggers ready and Macbeth could not have missed them. Then what was the problem? Then she says that had Duncan not resembled her father as he slept, then she would have done the deed herself. But look, the filial ties, the filial bonds stop her in her path from committing the most heinous crime that she can think of, and therefore she cannot commit the murder herself. And then she says, "My husband." And if you are following the Arden edition by Kenneth Muir, as I am following, then there is an exclamation mark. And followed by this, you have a discussion between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, which is like a staircase discussion. That is, the text comes down like a staircase. So Macbeth is also coming from the first floor to the ground floor, and the text replicates that. You know, in some editions, this "my husband" is followed by not an exclamation, but by a full stop. In some other editions, you find a question mark. And you know, it depends on the actor who is playing the role of Lady Macbeth, that how would she go about this expression, "my husband"? Because you know, Lady Macbeth has already unsexed herself. And Macbeth has already said that bring forth men children only. So now what kind of a relationship do they share metaphorically? Is it the relationship between a would-be king and a queen? Is it a relationship between a husband and a wife? Or is it a relationship between a murderous child and her murderous mother? So if she says my husband with an exclamation, so she is in disbelief. She's shocked to see that the person coming down the stairs is my husband. So this confirms her earlier doubt that whether the deed is done or not. But if she uses the question mark, then she is doubting that the person coming down from the stairs, whether that person is my husband or the murderous child I have given birth to, or is it the would-be king? But if there is a full stop, then the interpretation becomes even more difficult. Because then Lady Macbeth acknowledges that the person coming down is her husband. And we already see a rift between the two Macbeths, which would culminate later when Lady Macbeth would ask Macbeth, "Why do you keep away from me, so my lord?" So you can interpret it in three ways, whichever way you like. Does not matter, but it gives more and more layers and shades to the text. That is what I want you to realize. Enter Macbeth. I have done the deed. Let's thou hear a noise. So look, Macbeth still cannot refer to the act of murder as murder. And he says, I have done the deed. And a little while earlier, Lady Macbeth was saying that the deed is not done. So they keep on referring to the murder as a deed because it is a deed, it is a pact, which is a sure shot way of their rise to monarchy as well. Excuse me. And Lady Macbeth says, I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. So you see why I said this is the cricket chirping, this is the owl screeching. And then Lady Macbeth says, did you not speak? Macbeth replies, when? Lady Macbeth says, now. Macbeth, as I descended. This is a very interesting dialogue, a series of dialogues. Because when Macbeth says, as I descended, he is meaning both as I descended the stairs, as well as I descended morally. So it talks about his moral degradation as well. Lady Macbeth, I. And look, now Macbeth says ark, as if they are speaking in a borrowed tongue. Who lies in the second chamber? Donald Wayne. This is a sorry sight. Excuse me. By sorry, Macbeth refers to it as pitiful. A foolish thought to say a sorry sight. Lady Macbeth thinks that Macbeth is sorry as he has seen the sight of a murdered Duncan. But Macbeth has pity on Duncan. Rather, Macbeth is having pity on his own soul. There's one did laugh in his sleep, and one cried murder. That they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep. The problem is that Macbeth has murdered his king, who is the divine representative of the providential order in the state of Denmark. And by killing the king, Macbeth has not only disrupted his personal relationship because Duncan is his cousin, he has not only disrupted the political plane because Duncan is the king, but he has also disrupted the providential order in Denmark because Duncan is the representative of the divine right of kingship. And from now on, everyone will be able to sleep apart from Macbeth because he has murdered Duncan in sleep. There are two lodged together, so Malcolm and Donalbain, who are in the next room, in the room adjacent to Duncan. One cried, God bless us, and Amen the other. As they had seen me with these hangman's hands, listening their fear, I could not say Amen. When they said, when they did say, God bless us. So Macbeth cannot utter Amen because he knows that he has fallen from grace. He knows that his soul is now charged with the blood of Duncan. And when he will face Macduff later in Act 5, he will say, my soul is already too charged with thine blood. And look, Lady Macbeth says, consider it not so deeply. You know, something within her says that she should consider it deeply. And something within her says, if she considers it deeply, it would be fatal for her. And those of us who have already read the play once at least or seen it once at least, we know that this is dramatic irony at its best. Because Lady Macbeth would consider it not only in her awakened situation but in her sleep as well. She would later sleepwalk and she would later commit suicide. She would later die because of her heat oppressed brain. The brain which is too oppressed with the murder of Duncan. These deeds must not, but wherefore could not I pronounce Amen? I had most need of blessing and Amen stuck in my throat. So Macbeth is already considering the magnitude of his own action. He is now pondering on the heinousness of the action that he has committed. And Lady Macbeth says, these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. And ironically, we find that it is as if an unconscious prophecy by the fourth witch of their upcoming madness. Macbeth shall be mad for power, and Lady Macbeth shall be mad for love. And hence, she will sleepwalk and try to reach out to Macbeth. They both go mad, but in different ways. So says HMV Percival, one of the greatest of Shakespeare scholars. And Percival says that they both go mad, but in different ways. And Macbeth says, methought I heard a voice cry. Methought means I thought. Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. So this is his inner voice speaking to him. So sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. So Macbeth has murdered Duncan in sleep, and in an extension, he has murdered sleep for himself. The innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, the death of each day's life, so labor's bath, balm of heart minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast. So now Macbeth speaks in a huge rhetoric. In a prolongated rhetoric, Macbeth now talks about sleep because he knows that he would be deprived of his sleep. And remember in Act 1, Scene 3, how the witches had proclaimed that sleep shall neither night nor day. Remember when they said, I'll drain him dry as hay, sleep shall neither night nor day, hang upon his penthouse lid, he shall live a man for bed, weary 7 nights, 9 times 9, shall it dwindle, peak and pine, though his bark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest tossed. And there is a tempest raging on within Macbeth's heart. And Lady Macbeth says, what do you mean? So she tries to cut him short of his discourse on his own pangs of conscience because she knows that if it catches up with her, she is doomed. And Macbeth does not pay heed to her. And he says, "Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glums hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more." So Macbeth now realizes that he is a congregation, a conglomerate of multiple personas. The fragments of his personality now reach the surface and fight for dominance. Macbeth is a disjointed wholeness right now. And Lady Macbeth asks, "Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brainsickly of things? Go, get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place?" So, in a fit of conscience, Macbeth is without sense of practical experience, and he has lost all consciousness of the bank and shoal of time. And he has unwittingly and unwillingly brought the daggers with him. And Lady Macbeth says that go and wash your hands. They must lie there. Go carry them and smear the sleepy grooms with the blood. So you smear the guards with the blood. And Macbeth says, "I will go no more. I am afraid to think what I have done. Look on it again, I dare not. So I cannot watch the dead Duncan once again." And Lady Macbeth is back in her shoes. "Infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures." Ironically, this picture of the dead Duncan will haunt her in her sleepwalking scene. "If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt." And look, she cannot kill him because he resembled her father. But now she is suddenly, since the act is done, she is all high and mighty. And exit, knocking within. It is as if the external world is knocking into the gates of Inverness to enter and expose the horrendous crime that Macbeth has committed. And Macbeth says, "Whence is that knocking? How is it with me when every noise appalls me? What hands are here? Ah, they pluck my eyes out. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red." Macbeth is so very hypersensitive right now that even the slightest sounds are making his heart unseated. And Macbeth realizes when he looks at his hands the magnitude of the crime that he has committed. And he thinks that what hands are these? As if he wants to disjoint his hand and disown his hands from his own body, his own consciousness, his own conscience, so that he can get rid of the pangs of the murder, of the crime that he has committed. And he says that even great Neptune's oceans will not be able to wash me off of my sins. Rather, my hands will make the oceans crimson red. Incarnadine means crimson red. So I'll turn the seas, the green seas, the beautiful Nosets into red seas, seas of death. And making the green one red is a very interesting expression, you see, because green is a color we associate with life, and red is a color we associate with blood. So he has turned the life of Duncan into the blood of Duncan. Re-enter Lady Macbeth, and she says, "My hands are of your color, but I shame to wear a heart so white." White-hearted, white-livered, these were usually Elizabethan terms for coward. So she says that my hands are of the same color as yours, but I am not so afraid. and there's a knock. I hear a knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. Soon she will realize that all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten her hands. How easy it is then. Your constancy hath left you unattended. Hark, more knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us, and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Macbeth is lost poorly in his thoughts. And Macbeth says, to know my deed, twere best not know myself. So he wants to have a dissociation from himself. The ingredients of the poison chalice that he wanted to avoid have reached his lips. The ingredients of the poison chalice, as he said in Act 1, Scene 7, have reached the sinner's lips. Now all that is left is to see the repercussions, the ramifications of this event. And there's a knocking. And Macbeth yells, "Wake Duncan with thy knocking, I would thou couldst." So I dare you, wake up Duncan, if you can, with your knocking. And exhume, so they live. Now we come to Act 2, Scene 3, which is popularly known as the Porter's Scene. But the entire scene does not concern the porter. Okay, a porter is like a gatekeeper, one who opens the gate and closes the gate. But this scene contains the porter's interlude. The first part of the scene contains an interlude of the porter. So what is an interlude? Basically, an interlude is a short scene or a short dramatic act in between two tragedies or two tragic scenes or two plays. An interlude primarily lightens the mood. An interlude primarily creates a break. You see, up till now, the pace of the drama was building up. Up till now, the action was building up. The moment of action was building up. And with so much of the build up, if the murder is found out, it would be too much on the audience to digest or to accept. Number one. Number two, Shakespeare wants to create some suspense. Excuse me. But usually what happens in a comic relief is something happens which is unrelated to the drama. It evokes a lot of laughter and it lightens the mood. But Shakespeare uses the interlude as a double-edged sword. His interlude has a double function. Number one, it makes you laugh and lighten the mood a bit. Number two is that it creates a symbolic recapitulation and it creates a symbolic parallel to the heinous crime that the Macbeths have committed, and it becomes a symbolic commentary upon their predicament. So now let's read the porter's interlude. Enter a porter knocking within. So there is a knock. Porter, here's a knocking indeed. If a man were porter of Hellgate, he should have all turning the key. Ironically, the porter does not know that he is the porter of the Hellgate, because inwardness suggests invertedness. There's a knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? So, if you have read Paradise Lost, you know who is Beelzebub. He is the second in command of the Devil's Order. Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Come in time, pleaser. Have napkins enow about you. Here you'll sweat for it. So first is a farmer. Okay. Now, you see, the entire Porter's speech is a very potent and powerful piece of irony because the man is the porter of the Hell Gates, as in the mystery plays. So Shakespeare borrows from earlier tradition and then he develops upon it. Uh, this scene is a link between the medieval tradition of drama and the Renaissance tradition of drama, the Elizabethan tradition of drama. And here we have the first guest of the night, the farmer. So the farmer is an imaginary character whom the porter lets in, and he says hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Now, expectation of plenty means that uh, basically, due to the low prices at that time and due to the uh, lack of crops during those years, or the abundance of crop in that years, the farmer had to commit suicide. And he calls him time pleaser. But basically, time pleaser over here means time server. So one who serves the time because crops take time to grow. And if there is not a timely monsoon, if there is not a timely summer, crops would not grow. So a farmer is a person who pleases time. So he is time server. And he says, have napkins enough about you. So basically, he wants the farmer to have enough handkerchiefs so that he can wipe his sweat because hell is a fiery place. Then there's knocking again, and he says, knock, knock, who's there in the other devil's name? By the other devil, he refers to Satan, but he cannot remember the other devil's name. Faith, here's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Oh, come in, equivocator. Now, equivocator is basically a Jesuit priest who actually was known as Father Garnet. I have already spoken about the gunpowder plot, and there was a certain person called Father Garnet, a Jesuit priest, who actually was a part of the gunpowder plot. Now, when he was put on the um, trial, he equivocated. That is, he neither accepted the claims, neither he denied the claims. But any form of falsity or any form of non-allegiance to truth in Christianity is a sin. All right, and therefore the porter says that who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven, so he has come to hell. Come in, equivocator. You know, there is a very hilarious representation of this by I keep forgetting people's names, by the actor who played Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson. There is a beautiful skit by Rowan Atkinson which actually recreates the porter's scene in a very modern way. You can watch that; it's available on YouTube. So it's a very beautiful skit. Come in, equivocator. Then there's knocking once again. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Faith, here's an English tailor. Come hither for stealing out of a French hose. Come in, tailor. Here you may roast your goose. So the tailor, the English tailor, basically French hose is basically a kind of a pant which used to stick to the men's legs. Okay, and therefore there was no scope of stealing cloth. But this tailor has specifically stolen cloth. And then the porter says, here you can roast your goose. The apparent meaning is real, that here you can steal as much cloth as you want, and in this hellfire you can roast your goose. That is, you can roast your duck. But goose is also the smoothing iron that was called goose as well. So here you can roast your goose. So it has a double meaning. Knocking once again, and the porter says, "Knock, knock, never at quiet. What are you? But this place is too cold for hell." So if you watch Roman Polanski's version, there the porter was peeing while doing all of this, while saying all of this. But this scene is very suggestive. Why? Let me just go back a bit. Who is the first person who enters? A farmer. Who is the second person who enters? A, an equivocator. Who is the third person who enters? An English tailor. And look, Macbeth and Banquo speak in plant metaphor, farmer. Macbeth speaks as an equivocator to Duncan, and Macbeth says, "Why do you dress me in borrowed robes?" So the three imagery that we have been talking about in our previous lectures come here as three embodiments. All right. What are you? And then he maybe looks at the gate and he says, "But this place is too cold for hell." So the coldness of murder, the emotional coldness of murder, looms large over the place, and the personal order lacks emotional and spiritual warmth, and the political order lacks the heat of a fatherly care, and hence the providential order is also cold. And he says, "I'll devil porter it no further." But because this, I believe that some critics, even Coleridge, have said that this scene is spurious. This is an interpolation. An interpolation is basically when, imagine I am writing a play, and suddenly one of you decides that, okay, this scene sounds empty. Let me write something here, and you write something and you patch it up with my play. Then your part of writing would be an interpolation. Okay. Now, Coleridge and critics before him believed that this scene is an interpolation because Shakespeare could never have written such licentious stuff. But I believe that this scene is pure and sure Shakespeare because he intends to incorporate all the society in bits. Basically, you'll find that all the society, up till now, we were talking about kings, thanes, captains, and so on and so forth. But this is the lower strata of society. And Shakespeare wants to incorporate all of the society in bits and pieces for his audiences and readers to feel the pulse of the world of Theseus. The knocking is a kind of a heartbeat of the world out of Macbeth's Inferno. And he says, "I had thought to have let in some of all professions." And if there is a good actor, what he would do, he would come to the front stage and he would look at the audience and he would say, here's a farmer, here's a tailor, here's an equivocator. So therefore, the fourth wall would break and the audience would be incorporated into the experience of the play itself. And he says, "I had thought to have let in some of all professions." If Shakespeare had not intended to give a slice of the world in all of its variegated varieties, he would not have included this dialogue. And then he says that, "Go the primrose way to the everlasting bonfire." Everlasting bonfire is hell, and the beautiful way is called the primrose way. You see, sinning is more fun than being just. And there's knocking, and then he says, anon, wait, I'm coming." And then he looks at the audience and he says, "I pray you remember the porter." Then he opens the gate and enter Macduff and Lennox. "Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late?" And look, the porter is drunk. And in a drunken state, people tend to take things too literally. And people tend to misbehave, people tend to speak out of proportion, and the same thing happens with the porter. The only mistake perhaps which Macduff did was to call him a friend. And look, a lowly porter is now addressing Macduff as if he truly were his friend. And he says, "Faith, sir, we were carousing till the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things." So they were carousing, that is, they were having fun, they were partying till the second cock. That is the second time the cock crew. And he says that drink is a provoker of three things. What are they? And Macduff says, "What three things does drink especially provoke?" And this was perhaps another mistake. He should not have asked this. And the porter says, "Marry, sir, nose painting, so the nose becomes red. Sleep and urine. The nose becomes red, you feel sleepy and you urinate a lot. Lechery, sir, it..." And now look at my pen. "Lechery, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but takes away the performance. Therefore, much drink may be said to be an equivocator with lechery. It makes him, it mars him. It sets him on, it takes him off. It persuades him and disheartens him, makes him stand to and not stand to. In conclusion, equivocates him to a sleep, and giving him the lie leaves him." So you see, there is a very sexual pun in these lines. But what is very interesting is that this entire commentary can be a commentary on Macbeth's character as well. Drinking delves a man into the duality of dwelling between to be or not to be. This is what the porter meant. Now, these lines describe both the Macbeth's nature. Look, it provokes and it unprovokes. They are drunk in power. It provokes them to murder the king, but it unprovokes them as they are worried about the ramifications. It provokes the desire but takes away the performance. Imagine how they dwindled. Therefore, it is an equivocator with lechery. It makes him, it mars him, it sets him on and it takes him off, it persuades him and disheartens him, makes him stand to and not stand to. And finally, it equivocates him into a sleep, giving him the lie leaves him. That Macbeth will soon realize that he murdered Duncan for the children of Banquo to be kings. So, the witch's prophecy gave him the lie and left him. So look how beautifully Shakespeare incorporates the two parallel discourses. One is what happens when you drink, but the other is a commentary, a steady commentary on Macbeth. And this is only possible because perhaps Shakespeare wrote it. And Macduff says, "I believe drink gave thee the lie last night." So Macduff makes a lecherous comment. And the porter says, "That it did, sir, in the very throat on me, but I requited him for his lie, and I think being too strong for him, though he took up my legs sometimes, yet I made a shift to cast him." And now he is going on into his previous night's experience, what happened actually. And now Macduff thinks, okay, enough, and he says, "Is thy master stirring? So is thy master awake?" Enter Macbeth. Our knocking has awaked him. Here he comes. And Macduff has seen Macbeth and he says that our knocking has awakened him. And here he comes. And Lennox says, "Good morrow, noble sir." "Good morrow, both. Is the king stirring, worthy thane?" "Not yet." Look at the irony. He knows that the king will never stir again. And he says, "Not yet." "He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slipped." And then Macbeth says, "The labor we delight in physics pain." You know, if you are doing whatever you love, then even if it is physically taxing to you, you enjoy it. And then he says, "This is the door. I'll make so bold to call, for it is my limited service. So Macduff says that I'll wake up the king, though it is a very bold task done by me. Goes the king hence today? Macbeth says, he does. And then look, there's a colon and a dash. This is a guilty self-correction, and he says, he did appoint so. Well, at least he told me so. The night has been unruly. Where we lay our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death. So the wolf howled, the owl screeched, and you see, since Duncan was being murdered, the providential order was in haywire. The providential order was in a recalcitrant mood. So whatever was happening inside Inverness was happening outside as well, as an objective correlative, as an external manifestation, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events. New hash to the woeful time, the obscure bird clamored the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverous and did shake. The obscure bird is perhaps the owl, which was screeching throughout the night, and there was a tempest going on. And Macbeth says, it was a rough night. So all that he can think about is the rough night that went inside, not outside. And Lennox is a young man, and he says, my young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it. And re-enter Macduff, oh horror, oh horror, horror. So Macduff is now existing in the tripled horror, the trinity of horror that has surrounded his being. Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. Look, here is a double negative made to used to make a positive. What's the matter? Confusion now had made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder had broke off the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building. So the king's body is considered as the Lord's temple. So somebody has broken open the temple and stole away from it the body, the life itself. And Macbeth says, what is it you say? Life? And Lennox said, mean you his majesty? So look, what happens is, Macbeth knows that he has committed the murder. Imagine if you receive the news of somebody's death. What do you say? Who died? Not that he died. Unless you know that the person is dead, why would you say in the first place, oh, he died? His life is gone. Look, Lennox does not know that Duncan is dead, and Lennox therefore tries to confirm from Macduff's twisted rhetoric whether it is Duncan whom he is talking about. And Macduff says, approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Gorgon is a Greek myth. Basically, they were the three sisters. Medusa is one of the most popular Gorgons. Do not bid me speak, see and then speak yourself. So exeunt Macbeth and Lennox. They go to see the dead body. Awake, awake, ring the alarm bell, murder and treason. Banquo and Donalbain, Malcolm, awake. Shake off this downy sleep. So now Macduff calls for ringing of the alarm bell. And he says, murder and treason. So he calls for Banquo, Donalbain and Malcolm. Shake off this downy sleep. So shake off this drooping sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself. When a person is sleeping, if he is soundly sleeping, he looks like as if he is dead. So he says that let go of this false death and look at real death in the face. Up, up and see the great doom's image. Malcolm, Banquo, as from your graves arise and walk like sprites to countenance this horror. Bell rings, enter Lady Macbeth. What's the business? That such a hideous trumpet call to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak. And Lady Macbeth says, why is there so much commotion? Tell me what is the problem. And Macduff cannot immediately understand that Lady Macbeth is a party to this murder. And he says, oh, gentle lady, it is not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would be murder as it fell. So if you hear it, that would be the cause of your doom as well. Enter Banquo. Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal master's murdered. And Lady Macbeth says, oh, alas, what? In our house? And look, Banquo says, too cruel anywhere. Lady Macbeth is now so very concerned with the heaviness, the weight of the murder itself, that she has forgotten, she has let her guard down. And she says, he was murdered in our house. And Banquo quickly understands and he says, too cruel anywhere. So no matter wherever he was murdered, the murder would have been too cruel. And then he says, dear Duff, I pray thee contradict thyself and say it is not so. So please say it is false. Re-enter Macbeth and Lennox. Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there is nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. Look, ironically, Macbeth tells the truth. With Duncan gone, all the magnificence, all the grandeur in royalty and in loyalty is lost. Because Macbeth will make renown, grace toys. He will murder without any compunction of his conscience. And he would murder consciously from now on. What is amiss? You are and do not know it. So now look, Macbeth is quick to transfer the blame to Donalbain and Malcolm. And he says, you were there in the next room, you are here present here, and you do not know what has happened already. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. So look, now Macbeth keeps on speaking in images of blood. Because he has now faced with the he has now faced his masterpiece. And now he has become that ruthless, murderous child Macbeth, and now he can speak in language of blood. Malcolm says, oh, by whom? Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood. So were their daggers, which unwiped we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them. So Lennox is young and he does not realize the politics. He does not realize the shrewd game that the Macbeths are playing and plotting. And he gives in to the plan. Oh, yet do not repent me of my fury, that I did kill them. So Macbeth uses his fury as a self-justification. Oh, I'm sorry, I got so angry that I killed them. And Macduff is automatically suspicious. He says, wherefore did you do so? What was the need? And then Macbeth, quickly judging the flow of the situation, attempts to save himself with his poetic thundering speech. He says, who can be wise, amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outrun the causer, reason. So I loved Duncan so much that I became so emotional that I could not think rationally and I killed them. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood. and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in the nature, for ruin's wasteful entrance. There the murderers sleeped in the colours of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make his love known? So now he describes the scene in very vivid images. He says that there lay the fair Duncan, because he has bled to death, so his body has become silver, of silver color. And then there are the gaping wounds from where his blood has flowed. And there lie the murderers, besmeared in blood, and then you think that I would let them be. And look, Lady Macbeth. Here there are two interpretations. Lady Macbeth is actually fainting. And therefore she says, help me henceforth. She is actually fainting by imagining the picture of dead Duncan. But there is another interpretation. Macbeth is in full flow of his thundering speech. And if she did not stop him, then Macbeth would have said, who could refrain that had a heart to love and in that heart courage to make his love known, and therefore I murdered Duncan. He could have easily spilled the beans. And therefore perhaps she is acting. You can take any interpretation, you are free to do so. And Macbeth says, look to the lady, and Malcolm aside to Donalbain, why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for ours? So Malcolm says to Donalbain that we should retort right now, we should speak right now. Otherwise, people will think that we are the murderers. And look, Donalbain is a wise person. He says, what should be spoken here? Where our fate hidden an auger hole may rush to seize us. Waits away, and our tears are not yet brewed. So Donalbain says that if our father, the king, was not spared from murder, do you think we are safe? And you want me to speak over here? First, let us save ourselves, because it is not time for our sorrow. We must first protect ourselves, and then can only we protect the kingdom from the actual murderer. And then Malcolm says, nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion. And look, Macbeth is least concerned about the lady Macbeth. And Banquo says, look to the lady. Their split has already begun to happen. Lady Macbeth is carried out. And Banquo says, and when we have our naked frailties hid, that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. So Banquo says that we were in our night dresses, and it is chilly outside. We came out suddenly. So first let us dress up, and then let us discuss who could have committed this foul treason. And I swear to the throne of Scotland that I will stand against the murderer. So look, Banquo's loyalty resides with the throne. Macduff says, and so I. All say so all. And Macbeth cannot say it. So he says, let's briefly put on manly readiness. So, equipped with physical and mental readiness, and meet in the hall together. All say well contented. Exeunt all but Malcolm and Donalbain. And Malcolm says, what will you do? Let's not consort with them. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office, which the false man does say, I'll to England. So, Malcolm says that one of them is the murderer, and he will pretend to be very sorrowful. But let us not fall prey to that pretense. I'll run off to England. And Donalbain says, to Ireland I, Our separated fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. So he already has suspected Macbeth because Macbeth is a kinsman of them. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. Secondly, the near in blood to Duncan would be nearer to be bloodied, that is to be murdered. He anticipates the upcoming death of him and Malcolm already. This murderous shaft that's shot had not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore, to horse and let us not be dainty of leave taking, but shift away. So they are escaping because they know otherwise they won't be able to survive. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left. So the murderer would not have mercy on us because they did not have mercy on the king himself. So they escape. Scene 4 is basically like a social gossip. Shakespeare here incorporates the whole of the society in fragments and in glimpses. And this scene is a codic scene, and it is a codic anticipation of the disruption in the providential order of Scotland. And scene 4 takes place without the castle, so it is a glimpse at the world outside of Macbeth's Inferno. Enter Ross and an old man. Old man says, 70 I can remember well. So he's 80 years old. 70 years old. 70 means 3 into 20, 60 plus 10. So he's 70 years old. I can remember well. Within the volume of which time I have seen hours dreadful and things strange. But this sword knight had trifled former knowns. Now look, he's talking with a thane, and therefore he is using a flowery language. And Ross says, "Ha, good father, thou seest the heavens as troubled with man's act." So Ross is referring to the disruption in the providential order. And he says, "Threatens his bloody stage by the clock's tease day. And yet dark night strangles the travelling lamp. Is it night's predominance or the day's shame that darkness does the face of earth entomb when living light should kiss it?" So light is living in itself and life-giving in itself. So it is daytime by the clock, but yet it feels like it is night. So there is almost like an eclipsed situation. And you see, there is disturbance in nature because the natural order has been thwarted. Duncan has been murdered. And the old man says it is unnatural, even like the deed that's done. On Tuesday last, a falcon, towering in her pride of place, was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. So here they are speaking in metaphorical terms as well. Because a falcon is a far superior hunter than the mousing owl. But a falcon was taken out by a mousing owl, just like Duncan was taken out by Macbeth. And Duncan's horses are three most strange and certain, beauteous and swift. The minions of their race turned wild in nature, broke their stalls and flung out, contending against obedience as they would make war with mankind. So the horses which are obedient, horses represent vitality. So vitality has gone against mankind. The falcon represents observation. Observation has farsightedness, has left mankind. He said that they eat each other, just like the royal household would do later. They did so to the amazement of mine eyes that looked upon it. Enter Macduff. Here comes the good Macduff. How does the world, sir, now? And Macduff says, "Why see you not?" Ross, "Is it known who did this more than bloody deed?" Macduff says, "Those that Macbeth had slain. Alas the day! What good could they pretend? They were suborned Malcolm and Donald Wayne. The king's two sons are stolen away and fled, which puts upon them suspicion of the deed. Excuse me. So maybe they were bribed by Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's two sons, who have now fled. Against nature still, thriftless ambition that will ravin up thine own life means. So Ross cannot still believe it. He says that it is against nature. They would have they would have achieved the throne anyway. Why do it? To kill your own father just for the throne. Then it is most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth. He is already named and gone to Scone to be invested. So Macbeth is already named as the next successor, and he has gone to Scone to be invested with the title of the king. Where is Duncan's body? Carried to Colmkill, the sacred storehouse of his predecessors and guardian of their bones. So Duncan will be buried now. Will you to Scone? And Macduff says, no, cousin, I'll to Fife. Well, I'll thither. Well, you may see things well done there. Adieu, lest our old robes sit easier than our new. So Macduff is already suspecting Macbeth for the murder. And Ross says, farewell, father. Now, in this last speech, many critics have observed that perhaps the old man is God who has taken a mortal shape to participate in this grand scheme of the Macbeths. And the old man says, God's benison go with you and with those that would make good of bad and friends of foes. Basically, Banquo dies because he cannot make friends of foes. Macduff's entire family dies because Macduff could not make friends of foes. So this is a very prophetic sentence. And with this, we end Act 2. In the next lecture, I'll go into Act 3. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, the comment section is open. Thank you so much.